This is a video that I encourage you not to watch if you haven't played The Outer Wilds. Now, why am I giving a spoiler warning for a game that came out 4 years ago? It's because The Outer Wilds has no progression system, no leveling, no unlocks, no skill trees, no items, or even an inventory. The only metric of progression the game uses is knowledge, and the first playthrough of Outer Wilds is unlike any game I've ever experienced. Everything I say and every bit of gameplay I show will be a spoiler, no matter how small or insignificant. If you've already played it, you're good to keep watching. If you haven't, go play the game before anything else. I'll be covering the DLC as well, and the same rules apply there. With that, enjoy. I don't know about you, but I've always found space to be a fascinating place, a place that surrounds us and makes up the entire universe, yet we know so little about it, and what we do know is both fascinating and terrifying. I'd bet that most people would love to see what's out there for themselves. I know I would. I'd love to be able to explore and find things like black holes, neutron stars, other worlds, and supernova. I feel like it's an innate human desire to want to know more about the vastness of space. With that said, no game uses this curiosity better than The Outer Wilds. The Outer Wilds was released in 2019 by Mobius Digital, and it was the first game they'd ever released. It was in development for 7 years. If you can't tell already, the artistry in this game is off the charts, and the soundtrack, oh my god, it's one of the best I've ever heard in a video game. But if we're going to talk about this game, we got to do it right. And the only right way to talk about this game is to talk about discovery. Because in terms of exploration, this little indie game is unrivaled, and it puts all AAA open world titles to shame. The Outer Wilds allows you to go anywhere from the start of the game. One core mechanic of the Outer Wilds is the time loop. There is a set amount of time you have to explore and make discoveries and solve puzzles before the game resets you back to the start of your journey. So you technically have to complete the game within that time span, even though I'd say your first time around it's probably going to take you 10 hours or so. Maybe more if you want to explore everything as much as possible. First step to discussing the process of doing this is to talk about the tools that the game gives you to do so. These are the Scout Launcher, Signal Scope, and Ship Logs mainly. The Scout Launcher allows you to launch a scout drone that can take pictures as it travels, which is useful for seeing into places that you can't reach at the moment. The Signal Scope detects audio and is used early on to find other travelers like you, since they all carry instruments that the Signal Scope can hear. Lastly, the ship log. The ship log helps you keep track of the knowledge you've accumulated, so you don't have to memorize everything. And it also helps to draw connections and connect threads between different bits of all the bits of information that you learn. You're also given a translator that allows you to decipher the writings of the ancient Nomai, an alien race that inhabited the solar system before yours did. You'll be doing quite a bit of reading to uncover the clues that the ancient Nomai left you, but the quality of the story combined with the rather endearing style of the Nomai's writing make it pretty interesting to do so. Overall, there are 9 locations you can explore in the Outer Wilds. You've got Timberhearth, your home planet, the Addle Rock, Timberhearth's small moon, you've got the planets Ash and Ember, a binary system that's pretty close to the sun, you have the planet Brittle Hollow, as well as Hollow's Lantern, which is Brittle Hollow's moon, Giant's Deep, which is a large gas giant, you have the Interloper, which is a comet with the associated elliptical orbit, and God help you, you have the Dark Bramble. In In terms of gameplay, the Outer Wilds isn't too complex. You continuously fly out into the solar system to try and make discoveries, and each trip with the time loop, you discover more and more as you go. A lot of this game comes down to solving puzzles, which actually works surprisingly well with the time loop mechanic. See, as time passes in the Outer Wilds, certain parts of the solar system actually change with the, well, time, which means that there are certain things that you can only do either before or after a certain amount of time has passed. The most obvious example of this that comes to mind for me is the flow of sand between the binary system I mentioned earlier, the twins Ash and Ember. Um, that's why they're called the Hourglass twins. The time loop sounds discouraging at first, but thankfully your ship logs actually carry over between loops, which is pretty nice, and if you make it all the way to the end of the time loop, it's quite the spectacle. Because of this, the time loop is actually a lot more manageable than it first appears. The Outer Wilds is a game that is terrifying without really trying to be, except for in one place. The fear of losing oxygen, losing your footing, and just the emptiness of space is present throughout the entire game. Even if you don't know much about space, there is plenty of things in this game that will provoke fear. And speaking of fear, let's talk about the DLC, Echoes of the Eye. Wilds for the first time, I thought, wow, there is no way I'm ever gonna get to play anything like this again. Then the DLC was announced. The news that I was gonna be getting more Outer Wilds was massive, much like your mother. Not only did the DLC turn out to be everything I wanted it to be, it honestly might beat the main game for me. Echoes of the Eye adds two new locations to the game, the first of which is the Stranger, which you just saw me entering in the gameplay I showed. The Stranger is a magnificent location that, much like the main game, is tripping in artistry and detail. And while I won't say much about the other place you get to go, it definitely has its own place in this DLC. But what does the DLC do that makes it superior to the main game? For me, it comes down to three main things: information delivery, story, and discoveries. Let's talk about information delivery. In the main game, your primary method of gaining knowledge was by using your translator tools to read the writings of the Nomai and getting your knowledge from there. Now, I have no problems at all with this method because I don't mind reading, but I do understand that it could get tiring for some people. The DLC, however, has none of this. There are a couple bits of text when you first enter the Stranger, but your translator isn't designed for their language. Instead, you have to go around the Stranger and find slide reels and watch them to try and piece together what's going on. This is a superior method because it allows for a lot more intrigue and build-up, and it allows for the developers to, in a much easier fashion, tell you only what they want you to know without just cutting off randomly like sometimes the text would do in the main game. Rather, the slides have certain parts of it that are burnt out, which creates the mystery in and of itself as to why. It also helps to make the game a lot more creepy, and that is honestly just a prelude to the rest of the DLC. In terms of story, this one is purely subjective, but I do think that the story in this DLC is done better. Some people might prefer the main game, and that's fine, but I feel like the characterization of this new alien race in the DLC was done better than the Nomai were. Not saying that the Nomai were bad, but I do think this is better. There's more build up and drama and plot twists, and it really makes you feel a lot more for this alien race. This is what they look like, by the way. Lastly, but most importantly, is discovery. Now, I'm going to be using two very specific examples, one from the main game and one from the DLC, so consider this a belated spoiler warning if you're still watching and you haven't played it. I won't be using the absolute biggest examples from either, but still, you've been warned. In the main game, on the planet Giant's Deep, you have to learn two mechanics to reach the planet's core, which holds crucial information that'll help you out the rest of the game. First, you have to descend below the underwater current that sits under the surface. It stops you from getting through if you try to just fly or swim through it. The tornadoes seem pretty obvious at first, but they just all throw you into outer space. So, what's the solution? Well, it's right in front of you, and it seems painfully obvious once you figure it out. One of the tornadoes is spinning in the opposite direction compared to all the rest, so naturally, it'll throw you in the opposite direction, that being down. Once you get to the core, there is a field of electricity that won't let you pass whether you're in or out of your ship, and there's a bunch of jellyfish floating around going in and out of the field. So, what's the deal? Well, deep within the dark bramble, there is an audio log in one of the corpses of one of these jellyfish that mentions that they are insulated against electricity, so all you have to do is get beneath the waves, go down there, and swim up the jellyfish's asshole and wait until they sink beneath the electrical field, and boom, you've done it. This is what the Outer Wilds does the best. It is those aha moments that get you to go, oh, so that's how that works, and this is amplified in the DLC. In the Echoes of the Eye, there is a area of the game containing three separate puzzles that you have to complete in order to, well, progress the DLC. One of these puzzles is very simple. It's a bridge illuminated with light with a bell ringer on the other side. Now, before you keep going, huge spoiler warning for the DLC, by the way. You get to this location by dozing off at one of the fires that is surrounded by the strangers, which is what most people refer to the new alien race as. Now, these fires you doze off at have big bells above them when you go in, and most of the time you're just like, "Oh, why is that there? Maybe it's there to wake you up." Well, yes, exactly. In the dream, these bell ringers will detect you if you are illuminated by anything, whether it's by your lantern or by some other form of light. And when they see you, they will start to flash red, and you'll hear this ringing slowly getting louder and louder until eventually the bells in the real world actually wake you up and force you out of the dream. Now, for this puzzle in particular, above the bridge, there's a source of light, this big stream of light that you can't get rid of no matter what you do. And it seems pretty impossible at first to cross the bridge without being woken up by the bells. If only you couldn't hear the bells, right? Oh god. So you have to kill yourself in the fire instead of falling asleep next to it. So naturally, you don't have any senses because, well, well, you're fucking dead. So then when you try to cross the bridge, it's genius. The whole game is like this. It's filled with discoveries that make you feel dumb for not seeing it, but at the same time smart for figuring it out. There are much greater discoveries in the main game and especially in the DLC than the ones I showed here, but these ones cover the basic idea. Every answer to every question you'll ever have in this game is nearly always literally in plain sight, and they are deceptively simple once you figure them out. This deception of simplicity is the greatest part of the Outer Wilds, and it's what makes the game so unique. But it's also the reason why, after that first playthrough, the real glory of the Outer Wilds exists only in memory. Not saying that consecutive playthroughs aren't fun, you're very unlikely to discover everything the first time around, so there's always more to learn, but that first blind playthrough is without a doubt the best game I have ever played. It is a game that I simultaneously love and revere, but also one that I wish I could forget, just so I could get that first experience one more time. But no game will ever replicate what the Outer Wilds accomplished. No game will ever be as wondrous. No game will ever be artistic in the same way, no game will ever teach you in the same way, and no game will recreate this terrifying and beautiful curiosity.